What's going on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Eastern Current. Super excited about this little series we're going to do. It's going to be called the Weekend Warrior Series. And so we're going to bring on guys that aren't fishing guides, but guys that get it done, that catch a lot of fish, and they have small amounts of time that they get to do it. And so I think hearing the opinion and the strategies and the tactics of someone who has, just the weekend to fish and is still going out and being productive is probably more valuable than hearing, the strategies of someone who's out there on the water every day. If you can get it done on a Saturday and that's the only day you get to fish, I want to hear how you're doing it. So it's going to be a cool series, and these are going to be just on YouTube and just on the podcast platforms. This won't be on Facebook. So just go check them out there, and thank you all for tuning into it. But today we've got a really cool guest, Connor Bachman. I was able to fish with him this past summer, him and his brother, and we had a good day catching some, I think caught some redfish and some trout together in the Cape Fear River. But he's been absolutely smoking the trout up on the Neuse River and the lower reaches of the Pamlico Sound. And so I'm excited to bring him on for this episode. And I'm going to go ahead and flip over to his camera so y'all can see him. What's up, Connor?
How you doing, guys? What's going on?
Man, thank you so much for coming on. I was saying, you've been impressing me with the pictures and the smacking the trout lately,
Oh
crushing the
yeah,
trout.
man. It's been a killer year. We haven't had a hurricane, any crazy weather, any freezes or anything. So it's been a really, really good year. The trout bite's been hot. Like you said, weekend warrior, that's kind of how I roll. I work Monday through Friday, so the weekends I'm hitting the water as much as I
For
can.
sure.
Trying to get the best of this trout bite.
Definitely. So I heard you saying that, we haven't had any freezes and there's been no like big floods or anything like that. Do you think
Yeah.
that is the key to, why the season's been so good? Do you think it has anything to do with the kind of sanctuary up there where there's no gill netting anymore?
Yeah, I definitely think, the no gill netting and stuff helps. The main thing though, really from what I've seen, I went to ECU, spent 4.5, 5 years there. So I got to kind of see, the commercial fishing side as well as, the natural environment side of things.
Yeah.
Both play a big role, but, from what I saw, I think it was probably 3 years ago we had a heavy freeze.
Yep.
Killed a lot of fish, which was really, really tough on the fishing the year after. And like I said, it's been so warm the past 2 years since then. We've really noticed a huge, huge increase in the amount of fish that we've been catching, especially the size of fish
Yeah.
since that freeze.
Definitely.
Haven't had really anything to kill the fish since then, naturally wise. So it's just, it's been exploding. So
For sure. I think one of the cool things too that I've realized, well, I wouldn't necessarily say a cool thing, but I was having this conversation with a guide buddy, Ray Britton, who he
uh-huh.
predominantly guides on the New River. And so, the whole state has seen an incredible year for trout this year. But New River has been netted so hard, and I'm just sharing what I've seen.
Right.
And it seems like that population this year, like in the fall, was just as strong as the Neuse River, and we're catching lots of fish very consistently. But now on
Yeah.
the good days that the weather's right, prefrontal, you got a new moon or a full moon, and the bite should be really good. An excellent day is like 15, 20 trout, where it was like 70 to 100 trout. But
Yeah.
you hear of the guys up there in those areas where there's less commercial pressure, still having those numbers of quality fish. And I don't think that's a coincidence. And I'm not saying that this is your opinion either. This is just me talking here. Like,
Right.
but yeah, I think there could be. I was just having that conversation with him the other day, and to me, it's cool to see that little area is still being so productive. It's an area with less fish being taken out of the waters for the most part.
Oh, no doubt. And like I said, I think both, play a big role, as far as, the commercial fishing goes. As you take that pressure out, that obviously your fishing is going to increase. And then, your natural disasters and things as well. I found, if the state can figure out a way to manage, you can't really manage the natural disasters.
Right.
But if you can manage one of the two, I think we'll see an increase every year. You
For
know what I'm
sure.
saying?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it seems like the natural disasters in their own, like freezes and floods, that's almost enough on the trout population itself,
Yeah,
apart
no
from the
doubt.
recreational anglers and the commercial anglers to like
Yeah.
they see a lot. And rec anglers do a lot of damage too. I mean, a mirror lure is a pretty darn effective
Oh,
tool
you
for
got that
taking
right.
speckled trout out of the water.
Yeah.
So, well, cool, man. So, give me your kind of backstory. I want to hear how you got into fishing and how it's progressed to where you are now. And we've had
Yeah.
conversations recently about you want to taking it even further. So give me that whole kind of
Yeah. So I grew up kind of in the Piedmont area, Greensboro. You know, grew up. My dad introduced me to fishing at a young age. You know, grew up just pond fishing, fishing on local lakes around Greensboro. And that was, you know, panfish, bass, crappie, things like that. Um, and really probably, I say I probably got into like the inshore saltwater fishing probably, shoot, I would say around middle school. I started fishing with my uncle a lot more. He spent a lot of time at the coast, up in the Chesapeake Bay area, and then, you know, just up and down the coast in North Carolina. Um, and that's really when I got introduced to the saltwater fishing, and was hooked ever since. You know, I did a lot. I didn't do a whole lot of trout fishing growing up. It was more so striped bass, flounder. And then once I kind of made my way down to ECU, got in pretty well connected with a couple buddies down there, and just started spending a lot more time kind of in that brackish water in those estuary areas. And you know, found out about trout fishing, found out about the red fishing down there, the flounder fishing, and just, I mean, from then on, you know, addicted to it. It's been just a passion of mine since then. So, I don't know, I can't get enough of it, man. You know, spending time in school down there, I would say I would probably, my parents probably hated it, but I'd probably spend 4 or 5 days a week fishing as much as I could. As soon as I got out of class, get in the water. And it's just, I don't know. I can't really. It's hard to explain it, to be honest.
Yeah.
I love it, you know.
Yeah, that's super cool, man. And ECU is just right there in the heart of some really cool fishing, and some of what North Carolina has. I mean, in the heart of like some true estuaries and different kind of fisheries that really only North Carolina has to offer. You know, that style.
Oh, for sure.
Those tributaries along the Pamlico and all that.
Yeah, and I feel like it's kind of it's almost like a well-kept secret. I mean, you know, a lot of people know about it, but it's not as well known as you would think it is. You know, it's not. I mean, it's not like a vacation destination like a lot of the coast is, but it's got some of the best. Personally, I think probably some of the best fishing in the country when the timing is right.
Oh, I'd agree.
Not a lot of people talk about it.
Well, you look at some of these other places. I mean, the Florida Keys is one thing; it's tropical, beautiful. But I think of Louisiana, or like Biloxi, Mississippi, and that marsh area where it's not necessarily. Well, I think of like Hopedale and Venice and Empire and all those areas along the peninsula of the Mississippi River there that, you know, no one's going there except for fishing and hunting. But it's become this destination because of that. And I feel like the Pamlico Sound, you know, with a little bit of movement in the right direction could be that. I mean, I think that it would. 100%. I think the trout fishing could be better than Texas, just with the water quality and I mean, if those fish could get as big as Texas and the numbers of them, it would be. I mean, maybe I'm crazy, but I really think it could be.
No, I mean, I agree 100%, man. If it's managed right and things, you know, kind of go the right way, I think it could be some of the best. I mean, if not, you know, top 2 or 3 best destinations in the country to catch those big speckled trout. Sure. I mean, you're already catching, I mean, nice fish down there. I mean, a 5-pounder, especially this year. I mean, it's not uncommon to catch a 5 or 6-pounder down there.
Yeah.
But you know, if it's managed right, I think going up and beyond that is well within its aspects of it.
Most certainly. Sure. And not even the trout aside, but the redfish and the size of the redfish we have here in North Carolina is incredible. And that fishery, you know, it's a beach fishery during the summer, but when those fish come into that sound, it's just it's pretty incredible. And the average size too of the big redfish in that area that you fish, you know, going from Louisiana where like you're really pushing for that 30, 35 pound fish. That's like your trophy down there, to where like a 55, 65 pound redfish is, you know, you could catch one any day in North Carolina that time of year.
Oh, for sure, man. It's crazy.
Do you do a good bit of the old drum as well, or mostly just the trout fishing?
I've done some of it. You know, going to school down there, I didn't really have the setup for it. With my boat. I've been fishing a smaller boat. I've honestly fished a little 16-foot John boat with a 30-horse jet motor on the back.
I didn't know you had a jet. That's awesome.
Oh yeah. So it's kind of limited as far as, you know, doing some of the big water fishing out there. I've managed to, you know, on some calm days do a little bit of it. Yeah. But I've been kind of limited to kind of staying in the creeks and stuff for the most part, you know, trout fishing, and then like August, September, sometimes, you know, the slot drum will come in, so I'll hit those pretty hard, as in the flounder fishing. When we've had seasons, we'll catch those as well.
For sure. So let's talk about the trout a little bit. I mean, I think I could do every single Eastern Current episode about trout fishing, And like
Yeah.
and people would be more entertained by that than anything else. I mean, everyone is obsessed with trout, and I think it's because they're like a largemouth bass. Like there's so many ways to catch them. They do so many different
Yeah.
things, and they can, one day they can be eating everything you put in the water. The next day they might only want like a pink MR17 twitched every
Right.
15 seconds.
Yeah.
They're just crazy. They're annoying, but they're also awesome. But tell me about your trout fishery there and kind of how you target those. Well, just tell me about that area and those, where those trout kind of live and in the areas you fish.
Oh man, the trout fishing there is insane. From what I've seen and what I've read and stuff, there's quite a large population that lives in those rivers.
Yeah.
A lot of fish migrate in and out, but
And you're mostly in the Noose and the Pamlico?
Pamlico mostly.
Pamlico mostly. Okay.
Yeah. And so what I've found, a lot of fish migrate, but majority of those fish that we see live in that river system. And depending on the time of year is kind of where you catch them. This time of year, the winter months, they're obviously going to be farther up the river, farther back in those creeks and some deeper water. And then as things warm up, they'll move farther out in the mouths of the rivers, and in the mouths of those creeks and a little bit shallower water. But really for this time of year, hitting it on the weekends, as long as, from what I've seen so far, as long as those water temps are kind of staying in that, above really the 50-degree mark.
Yeah.
I've found so far this year, a lot of my fish have been in that 5 to 7 foot of water. Occasionally you'll catch them in that 3 to 4 foot of water. But like I said, as long as that water temps stay above 50, we're catching majority of the fish in the 5 to 7. And biggest thing really, from the most success I've had so far is on the MR17s. I know everybody fishes them. And to be honest with you, before the past recent years, I've hated MR17. I'll be honest with you. You got to fish them slow. To me personally, they're a boring bait. I've always grown up, throwing jig heads and a paddle tail, and occasionally throwing a Paul Brown. But the past few years has made me a huge believer in the MR17.
Yeah.
And really this year, just been crushing fish on them. I've got a couple baits here I'll show y'all that are a couple of my favorites.
Awesome.
The little tiny trout. I don't know if I can see that all right.
Oh, yeah, that's perfect.
Tiny trout with the sea eyes. Probably the best bait so far this year. The water's been pretty clear. We've had a decent amount of rain the past, 3 to 4 weeks. But other than that, the water stayed pretty clear, so that color has been a huge hit. And then when the water's darkened up, I've gone to some darker colors. I don't know the specific name of this one. This is more of a green pattern.
I've seen that one. I've never fished that, but I like that pattern a lot.
Yeah, it's been a good color in the river. It's a little bit darker. It's more of a green. It probably looks a little bit silver in my computer light, but it's a pretty heavy green tint to it. Both those colors have probably been my go-tos. Another one I've been using is like the Mardi Gras color. It's the pink back. But the thing I can preach to most guys, that are fishing MR17s, you're not having much luck. Slow down is the key to
Definitely.
it. It's the reason I hated it is a boring bait to fish sometimes, but
the way
a lot
they
of times
eat it though is not boring.
Oh no! When they hit one, you better have a good grip on your rod, man, because they'll rip it right out of your hand. Especially a 20+ inch fish. He's gonna let you know when he eats it.
He's gonna let you know for sure.
So a lot of times when I'm fishing one, shoot, man, I'll give it a freaking 7 or 8 count at times. Twitch, count to 7 or 8, twitch, because those baits sink so slow that you can fish it in 5 foot of water and count to 20 and it's not going to hit the bottom.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the key to it I've found is it stays in the strike zone a lot longer. Fishing a Paul Brown, they sink a little bit faster. And this time of year, especially when your fish are pretty lethargic in that cold water, from what I've seen, the Paul Brown not catching quite as many fish because it sinks a little faster. It doesn't stay in that strike zone as long.
You've got to slow it down or, to the speed of a mirror lure. And if you do, it's on the bottom. Is what you're saying.
Bottom. Yeah. And yes, you're not getting as many bites with it. But the Paul Browns, I'm usually catching a lot more fish on earlier in the fall. Water temps are still warm.
Yeah.
And you can fish a little faster and the fish are smoking it as well.
So one thing that I found too when fishing those types of areas, and trying to do, figure out where the fish are quickly, is maybe not necessarily looking for all the bites right off the bat, but like finding a bait that I can work a little quicker and work through an area until I get a bite and then pick up the mirror
Yeah,
lures and pick that apart. Is that something you do
yeah,
as well?
yeah, absolutely. And glad you brought that point up. So first thing when I'm getting out in the morning, this time of year especially, I'm gonna hang back in the creek a little bit, and kind of just slowly cruise the banks. If I see bait flipping, that's usually a good sign there's a lot of fish in the area. I'll
Yeah.
immediately throw an MR17. But if I'm not seeing a lot of bait on my depth finder or flipping in the water, um, like you said, I'll normally throw an 1/8 ounce jig head with like a DOA. I've got one right here. It's a key lime color.
Yep.
That's one of my go-tos. 1/8 ounce in that 5 to 7 foot of water I've found. You can fish it. You can fish it quick enough to where you can keep it off the bottom, but also you can slow it down enough to where you can still get good strikes on
Yeah,
it. You know what I'm saying?
definitely.
So I'll fish that. It's a little bit quicker than an MR17, and I can, if I get a bite or two here and there, I'll slow down, throw the MR17, and fish us area really hard
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
But like you said, if I'm not seeing bait flip, I'm gonna throw that paddle tail until I get a couple bites, and then slow down and fish that area really hard.
For sure. So tell me this time of year, are you finding more fish way back in the creeks, or anything throughout the whole creek at the right depth? Can you find fish in all of it, or are you seeing more of them pushed pretty far back?
Majority of the fish are going to be farther back.
Okay.
I've caught some fish farther towards the mouths of the creeks in the right depth, that 5 to 7 foot,
Yeah.
but the vast majority of them are hanging backs in those creeks. And I really think it's because, a lot of those creeks in the Pamlico River, in the backs of them, it's a lot deeper.
Mm-hmm.
So, if there's a couple days where it's 60, 70 degrees and the water temp warms up, they can get out of that water pretty quick in the backs of those creeks and get in the shallower water.
Yeah.
And if it cools off, boom, they can get right back in the deep water.
So when you're looking at the weather prediction for the weekend, what is like no, I'm not going to make the drive to fish today, or I'm definitely going to be on the water?
A day where I'm heck no, not going to go, not a chance. I'm making the drive. I would say if the lows are, if it's 3 or 4 consecutive days really hard where the lows are in the low 30s or even 20s,
that's a definite.
and the water, water temp's way down.
Yeah.
And then look at the wind. The wind for me, especially because I got a little bit smaller boat.
Yeah.
I mean, if it's blowing out of the north, 15 to 20, not going to happen for me.
Yeah.
And it's been cold because that water temp's going to drop, and it's just tough to fish.
For sure.
With it blowing 20, 25. But I mean, a day where it would be picture perfect is, and it really doesn't have to be warm for a lot of consecutive days. I would say 1 or 2 consecutive days,
of warming
where
weather.
it's warming weather, in the mid to upper 50s, 60s, and that wind is somewhat calm. I'm gone.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean, for sure.
So what is I'm definitely picking a topwater up and throwing it, because you can catch fish on topwater this time of year, trout especially.
Yeah.
What water temperature do you like to see before you start throwing a topwater?
I like to see in like the upper 50s.
Upper 50s,
yeah.
Right there
I would
around
say
60.
58 to 60 is when I'm going to start picking up a topwater to throw it. Anything below that, I've had a few blow-ups here and there, but the fish are so lethargic from what I've found. It's really, really tough to get a good topwater bite. But anything, I feel like 60 up is like prime. But I mean, I've caught fish in that 58-degree water for sure. Definitely. On top.
One thing I've noticed too, a lot of times on this time of year when you get that warming trend and you do throw a topwater, is a lot of times the fish that do eat it are bigger fish. Like those bigger fish will come up and eat a topwater plug. Sometimes before all the little ones are going after it. So
and I was gonna make a point. If that's kind of, if you want to catch, you can catch big trout. On an MR17, you can catch a big trout on a jig head. But from what I've seen in the years I've fished down there, if you want to predominantly target a big speckled trout, I mean a trophy speckled trout, topwater, from what I've seen, is the way to go for it.
For sure.
You're probably not going to get as many hookups. You're probably not going to get as many bites. But if you want to catch that gator, it's topwater 100%.
Topwater is what does it. Yeah, I would agree 100%. And it's just a fun way to catch them. It's fun to go. It's fun to go out and catch 60 fish. But if you can catch 15 fish and there's a really good chance one of them's going to be 5 pounds or bigger, I'll probably take the latter.
100%.
So outside, would you say trout fishing is kind of like that's your favorite thing to do around that area as far as fishing goes?
This time of year, in the like the later fall and the early winter, it's definitely my favorite. I would say really kind of this time of year, I'm more transitioning into like the striper phase.
Yeah.
Kind of laying off the trout a little bit and hitting the stripers pretty hard. Which that's another thing.
Yeah, let's talk about the striper some. I
Yeah,
love a striper. It's like a badass trout.
Oh, 100%, man. They're mean. They eat about everything. They pull hard.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with them. So this time of year, I start to transition into the striper phase down there on the Pamlico. And that's another thing. It's kind of, I mean, there's a handful of people that fish on the Pamlico River and Tar River for them, but it's nothing like Weldon, Roanoke River, where it's hit really hard. And they make the same migration. They're not quite as many fish that move up, but from what I've found, I've caught a lot nicer, the consecutive nice, 24 plus inch fish on the Tar. I catch a lot more of those than I do on the Roanoke.
For sure. Do you think there's more fish of that size, or there's less little ones? Do you have an
less little
less
fish?
Little fish?
I think there's less little fish.
Gotcha.
But really, starting I would say like late December, early January, you can catch them. When they're starting to migrate up the river, I'll catch them, in like the Little Washington area, any kind of deep ledge where that river kind of curves, and there's some narrow spots in the river. If you have half decent sonar, you're going to find them.
Yeah.
I mean, because they're stacked. I mean, from the bottom, a lot of times I'm catching, that 20, I would say probably 24 up to 10 to 15 foot of water.
Mm-hmm.
They're stacked up in like the earlier times of year. This time of year, if it's warm, it's been kind of cold, but the warmer months or warmer times of year, I've seen you're going to catch a lot of fish kind of up in the Greenville area.
Yeah.
This time of year, if the water temps are up and the river's low. And I would say one of my favorite baits in the Greenville area, I've got one right here, is a Spro. It's an MC stick. I don't know if you ever fished any of these.
I haven't fished that. No, that's a good looking bait though.
Yeah, this is the
Greenville
MC
colors.
Stick. Oh yeah, ECU baby.
ECU.
So this is probably my favorite bait. It's really, really similar to like a Rapala X-Wrap.
Yeah.
That's a really popular bait. This is a little more expensive, but from what I've found with this bait, it's got a little bit bigger lip. I don't know if you can see it on there.
Yeah.
A little bit more of kind of a downslope on the lip. So it dives a little bit farther, and then kind of up in the Greenville area, there's a lot of snags. And from what I've found over the years with that bigger lip is it's got a little more angle when it's diving, so I can bounce off of some of those snags a little easier than with an X-Wrap.
Yep. And what depth are you fishing with that bait for the most part?
This bait will run anywhere from about 4 to 7 foot.
4 to 7 foot, okay.
Yeah, I mean, I fish when the fish get up that far in the river. I mean, shoot, some of the breaks I'm fishing, some of the holes I'm fishing are 20, 25 foot deep up there.
Yeah.
But those stripers, they come up. I mean, they're so mean and aggressive. I mean, they might be at 15 or 20 foot, but they see that bait and they're coming for it.
Yeah. That's cool. I want to share one thing that I found. So I was fishing last year in the Neuse.
Okay.
And we were marking some fish around a bunch of snags, a bunch of fish though. So we're sitting outside swinging like soft plastics through there. I don't know why I just thought about this. But we were snagging and breaking off so many soft plastics. We were catching fish, but I mean every fifth cast we were breaking off a soft plastic. And so my buddy had done this before, and he's like, let's try this. Let's get directly up current of these fish. And we put on deep diver plugs, and we spot locked the trolling motor above them, and we threw down past them and rolled the deep diver plugs through them. And when we were getting, bites in that area, we could kind of jig the deep diver plug right in their face. Yeah. And then we started smashing them like that. It was a way I'd never fished for him, and it was very, very effective. He might shoot me if I said that on here, how he caught him like that. But have you ever done any of that? Like sitting above them with it, it's almost like back trolling, if you will, but you're still reeling the bait in.
Yeah, I've done some of that when the river's up a little bit.
And there's some of our rivers you can't fish trebles in, and so that gets kind of hard to do. But
yeah, so the tar you can. I know you can't keep the fish in the tar anymore. Which is a little bit of a bummer, but for me, I'm a big catch and release guy, so it doesn't really bother me too much. But yeah, I've done that when the river gets a little bit higher. this time of year, it's a little bit hard. The fish are a little more scattered.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll do some of that. Sometimes, if I, get a bite here and there, I might get above them, like you said, and just, either tie up to a log or hit the spot like on the trolling motor or something and just cast in that certain area.
Yeah.
But for the most part, if the river's low, I like to drift, man.
Yeah, I like to drift and fish.
Yeah, and sure. I'll hit, a 2 to 300 yard section, and if I catch, 4 or 5 fish in it, I'm gonna go right back up and fish that same section again.
Yeah, definitely. So what are some of the other baits you like to fish for the striper?
For the stripers, that far up in the river, the X-Wraps, the Spros are big. I'll throw a jig head every once in a while. Like you said, though, it's tough to throw a jig head just because there's so many snags. I found, your harder baits with a lip on them, you can bounce off some of those snags a little bit easier than with a jig head.
Yeah.
So really,
it's funny how that works because you think with trebles like you'd be in snags so much more, but it's not the fact, not the truth.
Yeah.
But,
and then every once in a while, I'll cut bait fish for them. Yeah. But for me, the artificial is the way to go. I don't know, it's way more exciting of a bite.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So if you were to cut bait fish for them, how do you set up for that?
So I'll find a deep hole in the river. Really, if I can find a deep hole, anywhere from, I would say the average depth in that river above Greenville is probably 7 or 8 foot.
Okay.
And in some of those bends, it'll get 18 to 20 foot deep. And in a lot of those bends, I'll find a hole, 18, 20 foot deep and set up on top of that hole.
Mm-hmm.
And then, have 3 or 4 cut bait rods out, and just sit them right there on the bottom in that hole.
Yeah.
And I'll usually fish simple Carolina rig with like a 3 to 4/0 circle hook.
Okay. How many ounces usually using to get it down there?
If the river's low, ounce to ounce and a half. Okay. If the river's, up a little bit, I've fished from 2 to 3 ounces at the most.
2 to 3 ounces. And one more question about is cut bait. What are you using usually for cut bait?
I'll use brim, anything fresh really. Yeah. They're not too picky. I found white shad are pretty good. Cut brim. That's probably really my main two. Every once in a while, if I catch a small brim, I'll throw a whole live small brim down there. You catch some nicer fish, but the white shad and cut brim is normally my two go-tos if I get that.
Right on, man. That's some good information. I've been itching so bad to get up there and fish those rivers, and I've been up and fished the Noose a couple times for trout around New Bern and a little south of New, or a little down the river of New Bern, but I haven't gotten up. I've got a buddy who kayak fishes. He films he actually makes his living on YouTube, and he's been going up there and fishing a bladed jig for striper. He's been whacking like crappie striper, but not as many striper. That's what he really wants, but he's been catching like limits of crappie and white perch. And
no kidding.
Like every day he's been up there 4 times and he's caught multiple fish, largemouth bass over 5 pounds.
Dang,
both
man.
days, and then a couple striper usually each day. But this is like one of the fishiest guys I know. But he's all about that vertical jigging. Like everything he does, whether it's in the ocean, in the backwaters, in the rivers, like he's always above his bait jigging. And that's what I suck at. Like that's what I want to get really good at.
And I found you can do some of that, or like late December, early January in the lower tar, like mouth of the tar.
He's further down. He's like I think right where that fresh starts.
That's where I found you can do some of that vertical jigging. Like earlier in the year down there when you can run over top of them with the sonar and you find them really stacked. You can hit them vertical jigging. Which, like you said, though, I don't know. I don't prefer to catch them that way. It's kind of boring.
No, I'm with you. I like your style way better, and that's what I want to do as well. But when they're not doing that, it's like I want to have confidence in all of it. But it's like you almost have to pick your niches of like, all right, this is what I'm going to focus on. If you try to like do too much, you start to thin out on what you're good at too. So
for sure, you can't do it all, no doubt.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome, man. Well. Let's go back to this real quick. We're almost at 30 minutes here, and we're going to try to keep the Weekend Warrior Series. It's kind of a lame name, but Weekend Warrior Series at around 30 minutes. But if you could share with people that don't get as much time on the water and want to be effective with the small amount they have, like what would be your one big tip for them if they're gonna want to try to be more effective?
Oh, that's a great question, man.
If you need, if
I
you,
would say, you just you gotta go,
yeah,
man. Like, don't be afraid to go. If the even if the conditions are kind of mediocre, like the way I learned was just going. I mean, you can read all the reports you want online. Um, you can do all the research you can, but ultimately, man, if you don't just go fish, it's so hard to learn.
yeah,
And some weekends, I mean, it might suck. You might get down there and it's blowing 25, but I mean, ultimately, that's how I learned.
yeah,
I mean, just being on the water.
yeah. There's no better time than to learn than being on the water. I was
Yeah,
talking with Richard Andrews. He just wrote an article on the Lower Roanoke fishing
yeah.
for our blog, and he was sharing how some people don't want to share the secrets and the tips and all this stuff, but he's like, man, it
Yeah.
really doesn't matter because 99% of people are going to spend so much time reading and doing all this stuff and then never go
Yep.
apply it. You've got
Yeah.
to apply it, and you've got to apply it multiple times until it starts to
Oh,
make a pattern
for sure.
and you start to figure out what's going on. I mean,
Oh, no
hours on the
doubt.
water are the best. And then inspirations like you of someone who just gets a few hours a week on the water and is making it productive, man. That's what's cool to see. So,
Yeah, and it's not every weekend. I mean, I don't go down there and crush fish, every weekend. But I mean, every weekend I don't go is a guarantee I'm not going to
yeah,
catch fish.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You can't catch them from the couch.
No.
You definitely can't catch them from the couch. Well, man, thanks so much for coming on the podcast and looking forward to doing some fishing together this spring and hopefully having you on for another podcast sometime.
Absolutely, man. Look forward to it. And you got a free weekend coming up or something, let's link up and hit the Pamlico.
Yeah, man, I would love to. I would love to. Well, guys, thanks for tuning
Cool.
in to another episode of Eastern Current. I think, yeah, this was episode 35 is what it was. So it's only going to be available on the podcast platforms and on YouTube and on our website, which will be linked both the podcast and the YouTube version of this. But thanks so much, Connor, for coming on, and we will see y'all in the next episode. Later.